Welcome to episode 115, and today I'm diving into a question that perhaps doesn't get asked enough, and that is, are your employee benefits actually working? Back in episode 28, I gave the top 12 employee benefits that attract and retain top talent. And although I recorded that a few years ago, it remains one of our most downloaded podcast episodes and blog article. And you can check that out by using your search engine to put in Amplify HR 12 employee benefits. So I thought, let's take a look further into benefits, because it's easy to fall into the trap of assuming that just because we offer certain perks or programs that, we're ticking those engagement and retention boxes quite effectively. But unless we're reviewing and researching what is of actual value to our employees, we may have benefits that don't actually help to retain our employees. So in this episode, I'm going to cover why is there a disconnect between what we want to do as an employer and what the employees actually experience when it comes to benefits, what the research actually tells us about which benefits matter most, and how do we audit what we're offering without necessarily spending more, because we want to make sure that our benefits are doing their job, that we're getting that return on investment for them. So let's start with this. Have you ever introduced a new benefit like a wellness app or an EAP provider, and then you've been really frustrated when hardly anyone uses it? And you're not alone. What I have seen over and over again is sometimes employees don't know the benefits are available. They don't trust that they'll be supported if they use them, or the benefits just don't align with their needs. And this is where it gets tricky, because from a leadership side, we think that we're doing the right thing, but our perception doesn't always match reality. And things like an EAP, which if you haven't heard of before, it stands for Employee Assistance Program. So essentially an employee, and usually their immediate family, can call or use a website to connect with a free counselling service. And this is a difficult one because although it's super valuable, the average utilisation rate in Australia is generally under 5%, which means that if you have 50 employees, less than 3 every year are using it. But then that's why the choice of an EAP needs to be more than just a ticker box. You want to find one that really works for your business, be it that they offer wellness support or manager resources or training. Something other than just counselling services is always helpful. And sometimes people ask, well, why even have something like an EAP when employees can just go to the doctor and get a referral for a mental health care plan? But we need to remember that not everybody can get to the doctor. It's an expense. It could be a big mental step to need to do that. That whole idea of having to go and talk to your doctor about what's going on and then go and talk to a psychologist versus a quick chat with an EAP provider who may then refer you to someone. And also I've heard for some people there's a fear about what goes into our mental health records that's, on our file that might then be looked at later on by insurance agencies, for example, or even future employers. So now those fears may not be grounded, but they're out there. So looking at some research, and I had a look at research by MetLife, and it showed that 78% of Australian workers expect their employer will take care of their health and wellbeing inside and outside of work. An employee who feel cared for are 3 times more likely to stay with their current organisation and 1.5 more times to feel more productive at work compared to those who don't feel cared for. So for things like wellbeing and EAPs and anything around that health and wellness space, we know that the research is pretty compelling when it comes to benefits. But, they're not the only benefits. And of course, the whole point of today is really, are our benefits actually working for us? So, having a look at some other research, Gallup found that only 23% of employees agree strongly that their organisation actually delivers on benefits, things like promotions or work anniversaries, and only 15% felt that their personal milestones like birthdays or life events were actually recognised. So there's a big gap when we think about how much recognition shapes engagement and culture, and also considering the research. And also, in my experience, her benefits do matter, but only if they're valued by the employee, they're communicated consistently, and they're embedded in our culture. So they're not just mentioned at onboarding and then never mentioned again. So, how do we actually know if our benefits are working for us? How do we evaluate them? And there are a few simple checkpoints. Firstly is usage rates. So are people using the benefit? And sometimes that can be easier than other times. So for example, I had an organization that the employees wanted something around wellness and exercise and fitness, but they're just not big enough to provide discounted gym memberships. So instead, we decided to provide everyone with a wellbeing allowance. They get a certain amount of money every year that they can use on a gym membership if they want, or they could use it on running shoes or a massage or something to do with wellness. So as part of that, then we want the review process to not just look at the utilisation rate to see if people were using it, but also to look at what they were using it on, because that then gives great data to the organisation on what else could we do from a better perspective. If lots of people are using it for remedial massage, for example, is there a way that we can connect in with someone that can come and do that in the office? So looking at the utilisation rate is about, is it being used? But it's also about what else can we find out about how it's being used, and importantly, communicate that back out to the organisation, because that's how it stays as a benefit and doesn't become an entitlement. Because at the end of the year, if we can say, hey, we had 90% of people take up this benefit, this is what they used it for, isn't it great? Here are some testimonials. We're selling the benefits through to our employees on an ongoing basis, which is one of the keys to actually having a successful benefits program that does drive engagement and retention. Okay, so that's utilisation rate. The second part is awareness. So do employees know what benefits are available and how to access them? And I know when we run engagement surveys and focus groups with employees, the benefits question is always an interesting one, because it is very rare that employees can point to the benefits that their organisation offers, even when their business may have some great ones. And there's always someone in the room that says, really, we do that? Do we? Oh, what about this thing? Do we still do that? So awareness is really important. Thirdly is relevance. So do the benefits still meet the needs of your workforce? And I can think of an example of an employer who introduced additional paid leave. So you could essentially pay for an extra 4 weeks per year on top of your normal leave entitlement. Now, that was introduced into the organisation, but then 5 years down the track, a new CEO, new employees, no one knew, is it still a benefit? No one knew how to access it. So, not only is there a question around relevance at that point, because if people weren't using it in that time, then maybe it's just not relevant to that business, but also goes back into that awareness piece as well. So maybe people weren't using it not because it wasn't relevant, but because they weren't aware that it was there. And finally, manager engagement. So, are our leaders reminding and reinforcing benefits use? And this just means mentioning benefits and looking for opportunities to recommend them. So, if someone is struggling with managing school holidays, then reminding them, hey, we have this paid leave scheme available. And if you're not sure of the awareness and the relevance, then the only way to find out is to ask. And surveys and focus groups are great tools here. Even informal check-ins can surface what's missing, or do we have benefits that just aren't being used that we actually need to promote a lot more. So if you're thinking, I don't really have the budget all the time to overhaul my benefits, I get it. So here are 3 low effort but high impact steps that you can take. Firstly, relaunch your current benefits. And at your relaunch, make sure that you're doing that at an all hands meeting, at somewhere that is interactive with people, so you can start to get an understanding of, do people value this? You might want to do some quick videos around it for your onboarding process. You might want to have posters in your break rooms, just things to remind people of what's available. And if you can get stories from your employees about how they've used the benefits, then you can also use that as a kind of testimonial. Secondly, you might want to pilot a new thing. So, you could ask people what would make a difference, what benefits they're looking for, and then you could test it. Now, my only caveat is you need to make sure that people understand that it's a pilot, and you need to be prepared to communicate really effectively if you don't go ahead, because the problem with introducing a benefit and then taking it away is that you can actually disengage people a lot more than if you never introduced it to start with. So you want to be at least 90% sure that you're going to go ahead with the benefit before you pilot it. And thirdly, you want to train your managers. So, they are your front line for embedding benefits in your culture every day. So you want to make sure they understand the benefits and they know how to look for opportunities to recommend them to their team members. So what do you think? Are your employee benefits actually working? And if you're not sure, that's okay. The most successful businesses that I work with do revisit this very regularly, because when benefits are strategic and aligned with your culture, then they will drive engagement, retention, and performance. So we recommend that you review your benefits at least every 2 years as a whole program, but there may be pieces that you look at more often, like EAP utilisation or your wellbeing dollars, as I previously mentioned. And if you want to just cut through the noise and make your benefits work for your business, you can also book a free discovery call with us. Just go to the website and you'll see the links there at amplifyhr.com.au, and we can help you to align your people strategy with getting results. So thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And if this has sparked any ideas, I'd love to hear from you. Just connect with me on LinkedIn and we can start a conversation. And if you've received value from this episode, I would love it if you could leave a rating or a review over at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, so someone else can also find the episodes to help with their business. Until next time.